Welcome to the Second Bite podcast, where we talk with top entrepreneurs and CEOs about creating valuable companies through creative transactions. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hey, welcome back. This is Todd Taskey from the Second Bite podcast, where I have the good fortune to interview CEOs and founders of companies where the founder has accomplished something what I think is very interesting, which is to build a business and oftentimes have sold that business either to private equity or to a larger strategic buyer and are now working on the second bite. In this particular podcast, I am privileged to have Reid Carr with us from Red Door, which has done neither of the things that I described, but has built a really, really interesting business and a great digital marketing agency. And he's going to talk to us a little bit about going it alone, if you will. So, Reid, I'm just thrilled that you would make time to be with us today. So thank you for that.
Yeah, wonderful to be here. Thanks for having me.
Hey, and just before we jump in, Reid, I want to thank our sponsors, the people at EOS Worldwide. EOS Worldwide is an entrepreneurial operating system that lots and lots of my clients have used to organize their business well, to maximize the profitability of their business well, and to get the most out of it, not just from a financial perspective, but from a personal perspective as well. So if you have between 10 and 210 employees and you're not familiar with EOS yet, you should check them out at EOS Worldwide. I think you'll be impressed with all the materials that they produce and the education that they provide. So, Reid, with that being said, I will thank you again for being on the podcast. And I was hoping maybe we could start off with you telling a little bit about Red Door and kind of putting it in context, the people that you serve and the services you provide to them.
Absolutely. Easy enough. It's something we have to do every day. So we're headquartered in San Diego. I have another hub in Denver. We are about 100 people. We are focused on enterprise brands. So, it hasn't always been that way. I had kind of earned it over the 20 years we've been around. But where we are today, we work with some pretty fantastic brands, Titleist and Shea Homes and Drybar and Revlon and Sunbum and a lot of brands that you'd be familiar with. Titleist is a fun one in terms of the golf game if you feel like doing that. So we're helping these brands on kind of multi-channel marketing. So we want to make sure that we are Red Door Interactive, Network Interactive matters a lot here. And we started, like I said, 20 years ago. So the idea back then, I think it's been corrupted into the idea of digital, but really it's about brands being interactive with their customers. And that was kind of the tipping point back then when customers really could start to kind of speak back to these brands and people had to understand what that relationship is going to be. So we help these clients have these fantastic multi-channel relationships with their customers. So we handle brand work to try to articulate what the brand stands for and what it can mean to consumers as well, or businesses. We have B2B brands as well, to buyers. And we help them through paid owned earned channels. We build the websites and those platforms. We measure them through data and analytics. And then obviously we have our creative team as well. So, that's what Red Door is built on, was this idea of how we kind of put all these channels together and build these positive, productive relationships between consumers and their buyers, or with brands and their buyers.
And it's interesting, when you go back 20 years, that's almost the beginning of digital, right? From that perspective, yep. When agencies did describe themselves as digital or traditional.
Right.
So did you start from the early days? Did you start working just with brands? Was that a conscious decision, or did you just kind of go out on your own, try to make it doing, basic quote unquote digital work and got better and grew into larger?
So, I guess unusually so. I think, particularly as I really, talked to other entrepreneurs, I wrote a business plan before we started the business. I assessed what I thought was going awry in the market with this tipping point, as you say, of the web. And I started my career in traditional, a traditional agency called TBWA Shy Day in LA. So really focused on creative. That was, I was there at the era of the Energizer Bunny, the Taco Bell Chihuahua, the Think Different campaign from Apple, Dream Garage from Nissan. So these really meaningful brand experiences, but they really weren't touching anything on the digital side at that point. Then I went on to a dot-com incubator where it was only digital and building these online businesses of this idea of if you build it, they will come. And really foregoing the traditional component of things, of speaking to consumers and giving them a reason to buy, a reason to believe that this brand is going to be useful. And people really weren't trusting the web yet. So I thought integration mattered, that these things need to be handled together. And so I went on to an agency in San Diego, which is where I wanted to live, which is really kind of that major part of the feature of platform of Red Door, being in kind of places where you want to live and really embracing and empowering people in the way they want to live. But so, I saw this idea of integration where back in that era was, integrated agencies had a PR, advertising, and web. Was kind of the way they looked at it. And what I recognized at that point, was that, it was three different entities, almost three different departments, all selling to the same person. They were not integrated. They were just, it was effectively there for the agency's benefit of saying, hey, what more can I sell to a client? So anyway, I was looking at that, and I wrote the business plan to say, look, one is you can't have just a web department. I mean, think about that today, right? I mean, there are search engine specialists and email specialists and data specialists and all those pieces. And back then, a lot of the people who've been in the industry for a long time thought it was, you just need, a programmer or something like that. And all of a sudden now you're web. So, I think that was that part of it, as well as being able to articulate what a brand stands for in all the different ways, and started Red Door. As Red Door Interactive started doing mostly traditional work. And so then we were also building websites, and that was kind of the benefit of coming out, or at least, starting the business when we did, because I certainly believe that, the website, and I still think it's this way. It's kind of that's Rome, as we say. All roads lead to Rome, and the website is really cornerstone to how a company is going to communicate about themselves on every dimension, whether they're recruiting people to work for them, customers buy from them, partners, whatever that may be. So I think it was one of the best places for us to kind of speak to integration. So, thankfully, again, starting when we did, I got, cold calling brands, companies that didn't yet have a website. I mean, that was where it was at the time. Now, obviously, that's not going to be the case. Certainly not for the brands that we deal with. So, that was the platform and the idea. Having written a business plan and recognizing on that one dimension what's wrong in the market as it relates to the kind of clients that we wanted to serve, with an eye toward knowing where we wanted to work, which is that I wanted to work on enterprise brands because of what I enjoyed doing when I was at Shia, but had to earn it, had to work our way up to get people to trust at the time a 25-year-old, dude trying to make this happen. So, and then the other dimension of it is how we're going to treat our people, and how at the end of the day, we are a people business. We are only as good as the people that we have in the organization, because all we're working off of is ideas and acumen. And so trying to put those pieces together as well.
And so can you give me just a rough range maybe of kind of the size of the business from a revenue standpoint?
So we're about 100 people at around 20 million.
So
in services, I should say.
Yeah. So there's a lot of people that go out on their own, start an agency. You perhaps have the benefit of having 20 years behind you, but there's certainly a lot of guys that aren't doing 20 million of revenue, particularly with the quality clients and the retention that you have. Do you remember back to, let's say, when you finally, got to a couple million of revenue and you're like, wow, okay, maybe there is something here. Do you remember the big kind of first steps you took to becoming that quote unquote digital? Was it helping your clients that needed a website to be found on the web, and then did it literally just grow from that, or did it happen another way?
No, I mean, it was an evolution. One of the things, oh, obviously evolution. I think there is one dimension. I just had to learn how to run a business first and foremost. I mean, know how you make money, where you make money. I mean, I think it's a real kind of. I think a lot of the stuff that's really critically important is the really simple questions that are far more complex when you get down to it. I do remember being asked how do you make money? If you do, a couple of years into the business, by some really seasoned, executives, and you kind of like go and launch into, well, obviously we build websites, we do, and like, no. Like how do you make, what drives the profitability of the organization? So first and foremost, I mean, I didn't go to business school. I didn't do any of that kind of stuff. I was in advertising and journalism major basically. And so, yeah, I had to ask friends of just like, how do you read financials? Like, what does this stuff mean? And that's really, I think, got getting curious. It wasn't about what it was we were going to sell or adding new service lines or anything like that, because I had this vision of integration, and every client is different. They have different needs and they need different relationships with their buyers. So it wasn't really about that, as much as it was about understanding, what kind of clients are going to work for us, how we work our way, improve our way into the next level of clients that we want to work with. And then later on, getting through how do you operationalize this stuff such that you can be consistent. And so, those couple $1 million into the business is I still had no idea how we made money or what, really what we were doing. So, I just kept focusing on what I thought was right for clients in terms of what their business would be, and then hire the people that we thought that could satisfy those needs. And I mean, that part of it has evolved as well. And back in those days, you really had to convince people to come along with you on the ride. And now, which is not to say we don't have to convince people to come along for the ride for us now, but we have people know who we are. They want to work for us. I mean, we have no shortage of when we post a job ad of people who want to work for us. I mean, back then it's way harder because they're like, I've never heard of you. Who are you? And so how do you find back then the diamonds in the rough and cultivate that to where now, how do you kind of find the diamonds in all of the opportunity that we get in terms of people that we bring on board? So, to this day, I don't think it's a whole lot different from then of just figuring out what is it that clients need, and then who can satisfy those needs. And then with all of that, now there's a lot of layers into making sure we're doing the things that are going to be both profitable for us as well as sustainable for and valuable to clients.
And so let me ask one more question on that point, and then we'll move on. So
Sure.
I know from a services standpoint, you do web dev, but you also do SEO and content analytics, project
Yep.
management, on and on.
Yep.
You obviously didn't launch all those at once. So
Nope.
how did you decide what to add next? And where did you get the expertise, perhaps the confidence to do that?
Yeah. I mean, you see, obviously didn't launch those all at once. In some ways we did. I mean, you got to realize that things have evolved. So the same person who maybe did web development was, and some of the people who were doing project management were also doing email, or, I think a lot of that stuff, because it changed over time. I mean, like the expertise that I mean, I did the analytics of for clients, and the last math class I took was in high school. So, it was, you going through that now to watch what people who like do analytics. I mean, we've got people who just do analytics implementation, much less evaluation and then reporting and the data science behind it. And I mean, it has just evolved. So on some ways, we haven't really launched a new service area. I mean, it also depends on how you characterize it. But like, I remember launching social media. We could not find people who did social media. That didn't exist. So I hired a person who did PR, who ran her own blog and seemed to be kind of cool, like doing like leading edge stuff, in what was the basics of, what would become social media. And it took us a year and a half to convince any one of our brands to put up a Twitter handle. So, and and this, that I learned lessons on launching services from that standpoint of like, we're ahead of our clients. I learned a really powerful lesson from that is floating that salary for a year and a half because I believed in it and no one else, the clients did. Like, I mean, I really remember having these conversations. Like, why would we don't want to give customers a way to talk bad about us, or we don't want to make them, and I remember there's a lot of stuff. We were the first to put a restaurant on social media on Twitter. And so, and I remember on Facebook specifically, actually, because we also did that. The stuff we got right at the first day we launched it of like horrible stuff from people when you kind of open those floodgates. So, and dealing with that. And we did that probably at this point, I don't know, obviously more than a decade ago. It had to be like 15 years ago, probably. It had to be about 15 years.
And have you always been the driver in that, in terms of the leading edge and pushing and doing what's coming next?
Yeah, I mean, we've always been that, but now I just know better how to time the investments and how to get clients on board. I know budgetary cycles now. I mean, it's different. It just does not, the same things don't apply. It just depends on your customer and who you sell to. But, if you're selling to this if your clients are, entrepreneurial and startups or whatever, you could convince them, you talk to the CEO and say, hey, I have this great idea. And tomorrow they say yes, and you're off and running. I was talking to one of our former clients went to a new place. They called us up and said, hey, can you help us here? We want to get this program going. And I said, you right now it's 18 months away. And they laughed like, oh, I know we're in this real corporate environment. Like, no, I mean, yes, but let's get practical here. Is like your budgets are due this month, for your, calendar fiscal. And this is such a big initiative that they're not going to buy off on it on the first thing. So you are 18 months away from approval because you have to wait a whole nother year to get the budget for this. And they were like, oh yeah, you're right. It's like, that's how the pace of it. And I get it. As much as people get frustrated by how slow sometimes things can go, things keep moving.
So would you apply your learnings? For example, you said you held somebody on salary for 18 months. Would you slow the time before you hired that person, or would you still make the investment so that they would be more educated, or would that just be unnecessary expenditure?
So we found a handful of different ways of doing that, right? I mean, you have partners that you can leverage to say, hey, here's kind of what we're thinking, envisioning. And there are people who are doing, some of the leading edge stuff are doing them for your entrepreneurs and not for your, Fortune 500s, because the Fortune 500s are going to lag. Most of them will lag. So you can show examples and say, hey, we want input on this and we want to show this and get some support that way. Now I think we've got the breadth within the organization to, find probably someone who's the closest related to that new area and have them start to blossom that out of whatever else they're doing. So they've got most of their capacity taken care of by current client work. You have, actually, and then partners sometimes too. Even, there's a lot of things now are software connected in some way. So, our services, we're saying, hey, a client should be, invest in, CDPs or something like that. And obviously from a services standpoint, what we want to do with that. Well, you have partners who obviously provide those CDPs. So they will have consulting services or help us sell that stuff through so we can bide our time to then launch appropriately with the people, because you just can't, you really can't float those salaries for that long. I think we made that mistake enough times early on where you're like, wow, how do people not see this? Like, how are they not doing this stuff? And I just, stuff's a risk.
I talked to somebody the other day that was early on TikTok for their clients.
Yep.
And TikTok's, a little bit challenged, like any new platform, with attribution and measurement and some of the other things. And so some of their clients were a little bit upset about the fact that they feel like they wasted money on it. It was too bleeding edge. How do you try to coach your clients along those ways? You talked about it from the budgetary standpoint, but do you ever advise, brand clients that have a valuable brand that they want to protect as well as promote? on the timing around new technology or new platforms?
Oh, absolutely. I think here's the thing. I mean, I think particularly with enterprise brands is most of them don't have to go be bleeding edge on anything. I mean, there's an abundance of stuff that they're already doing that could be optimized and get the growth that they want out of it. So, are they
That they're
concerned
optimizing right now, or they're
or that
not?
they need to, that they could? There's
Yeah. Oh,
there you never, and it's so funny. I would talk about like small clients or big clients. Everyone's like, well, we don't. I have never heard anyone, I don't care how big they are, say they have too much budget or there's all we have too many resources. We just can do everything that we want to do. Let's just do it all right now. No one ever says that. So I think most cases there's a bunch of stuff that we're already doing that can say, from a tactical base, that can drive 10 to 15%, 20% more if you just
immediate return.
invest in it. So, do we think that, on TikTok side, I would say like early on, we had some stuff we would experiment. We do a lot of experimentation. We have kind of like your, what we call RDI labs, but like sandbox. So like play around with stuff. And we've done some funny things. We've done Instagram filters. We've done like random stuff we've played around with, electrical, paint. So, stuff like that where you just screw around with this stuff and do different things and see how it works. And then you can show an example to a client, go, here's how it might work. And this is where it would work well for you. But in most cases, they're not going to invest in that experimentation if there's any kind of brand risk whatsoever. I mean, and on TikTok was one of them that there was a lot of concern for big brands in that. And so then the question would be, are we really worried as the number one brand in golf that some startup is going to like take you down via TikTok?
Probably not.
So, right. So now, is it a platform that we ultimately can use? Absolutely. And we can watch it and track it and see how it goes. But also, like, when there was concern about whether or not TikTok was spying on people, whether, who's the investors behind it, all that type of stuff, do you risk more harm if you were to get kicked out of a country because you're on a platform that, oh my gosh, I didn't realize it, but was doing these things? So, we really have to be careful with it's a next level of care. We have got to be on the ball when it relates to WCAG. We have got to be on the ball as it relates to privacy concerns. For any one of these clients, that is just different than like, hey, let's, put up a funny TikTok and see how it goes.
Right.
I mean, I hear there's a lot of brands that have done, big brands that have done some really cool stuff. For sure, and they got ahead of it. But I mean, I'd say most brands don't need to do that.
Yeah.
I should say, most leading brands don't.
Let me shift just a little bit. You guys have been best place to work in Ad Age, in San Diego, probably brought other places as well. And I know you have a lot of demand for open positions in an environment in the summer of 2021 where there's a great competition for good talent. And you guys have very good people, very good talent, and a great culture. That just doesn't happen. Can you spend a couple minutes talking about the focus perhaps you guys have put there and why you've been as successful as you have?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it was it was part of the business plan as well that I mentioned earlier. I remember it being a conscious business decision, not just a kindness of your heart. But I mean, I do think like rooted in. I live in San Diego because I want to live in San Diego. I could live in LA because that's where as far as Southern California is, where like the root of advertising or digital or up in the Bay Area or something like that. So I think there's a root in wanting to balance kind of a lifestyle with the work that we do. But then the other balance of it was, you know, I was asking myself when I wrote that business plan, why would someone, spend $1,000 an hour for an attorney or $100 an hour for an attorney? Like, what makes the one that's $1,000 for their hour? Why would you spend that much more? It's because you see more value in that 1 hour that they're spending. So I started kind of looking at, it's a very billing rates oriented service provider type relationship. They say, well, so it starts coming down to, you have to have the best talent. You have to train that talent so they continue to get better. And then obviously, if you're going to do all that, you better keep that talent. So that when you invest that training, that they become more valuable, that you're paying them. So I think it just makes business sense, and I think a lot of people kind of forget that at the end of the day. It's the thing that's going to ultimately make money. So I think why. So then the focus on all of that was understanding what those key pillars are as it relates to. Which have not changed in 20 years and probably even longer. What those key pillars really are for keeping people around is, do you like and respect the people you work with? Which you need both, right? I mean, you can't, I always say if you like and don't respect them, like they're fun to hang out with, but it's not somebody you want to work with. Or if you, respect and don't like them, then you can only handle that for so long. So you kind of speak to the idea of like what kind of people you need to bring into the environment. And the next one beyond that is, do they have the tools to do their job effectively and really do their best work? So we invest in the stuff, the tools. I mean, I think another one, the example we give is like in construction, you give somebody a hammer, you give someone a nail gun. I mean, who's going to be more effective and faster? And then ultimately that same amount of time, they're going to be like, I'm going to go work for the people who give me the tools that make me be able to move through this faster and do my best work. Are they compensated fairly? We make sure we understand what compensation looks like and all the different ways we can do that, and making sure that we're competitive with the environment, because we also have to make sure that there's that balance of being equitable for the organization and make sure that we're sustainable, but also make sure we're paying for the value and affecting our billing rates appropriately so clients understand how valuable our people are.
Yeah.
Obviously we have people talk about core values or mission and purpose or some of those things, and those are absolutely guiding principles, but you've got to remember that each and every person has those things that they have to be satisfied. And values and all that stuff is, how do you bring a bunch of people together towards some vision of alignment of where are we going? What are we doing? Who else is around me? But those other fundamental truths will be in lots of different organizations with different core values and different organizational standards and that. So like the other part of it would be, do we have a means by which, other questions are, does the company, or do I trust them and that they have my best interest at heart? So that's involved a lot of communication and transparency and openness and doing everything that we can so people have the information they need to make their decisions that affect their personal lives. Like, is this where I want to stay? Am I going to, I'm going to look for a different job somewhere else because of other needs that I may have? And approaching it with that authenticity that we're not for everyone, that we're not for everyone forever, and things like that as well. So, anyway, and that's a handful of those dimensions. And I think people spend a lot of time on value, mission, vision, values. And I think there's some other pieces that are just going to say, everyone is going to, no matter where you are, have a handful of things that just really are the motivating factors. People talk about, people lead managers, not companies. I mean, making sure we're training managers, making sure they have the tools they need, because people don't give a lot of clearance to the fact that a lot of managers at some point, they're first time managers.
Yeah.
And they're learning too.
It's interesting. I've mentioned at the beginning, our sponsor, the people at EOS, they talk very much about this, and they give people tools to help to implement exactly what you're talking about, because it really does sink all the way into the organization. And it's those people that are the organization when they present themselves to your customers.
Yep.
So those are good words. Let me shift gears again. Let's talk about the business itself. I would imagine you have private equity and strategic folks reaching out to you, interested in doing something, probably on almost a weekly basis, if not a couple times a week. When you think about that, typically there's always good and bad, like most things in life. Are there any advantages that you see that private equity might let you take advantage of? And the second part of my question is, what concerns would you have about partnering with private equity?
Yeah, I mean, so private equity, a lot of times, obviously that comes with money. I mean, I think not just money, obviously, to go into your pocket, but money to invest in the business and continue to grow that. We talked about, investing in new areas of growth. Obviously, one of the things I see most consistently with private equity around competitors or people in the market is that they buy up a bunch of other uh, adjacent services, other similar services, and start piling them together to create scale. You create enough scale, then you can sell it off for more money. I, I get the idea that having some more cash gives you some clearance and take bigger swings and take risks. There are definitely things that if we had more cash in the business, we could invest in and could deploy and see strategic opportunity. But at the same token I would probably see them in the same way I saw investing in one person to do social media is for how long are we going to float this? Is if we believe that we're going to build out, and I think what a lot of people tend to do, well, there's a handful of things, but another thing they tend to do is try to build, software or something like that because they see, bigger multiples in that. So I think, you take a look at what, private equity is there to do. And in most cases, private equity, what they're there to do is make more money. They are there to create value in the business and then sell it for more later. I've always been of the mind that, first and foremost, I need to make sure that I'm doing right by clients and customers, that we're moving in the right places, we're listening to them, we're adapting to them, and that sort of thing, as well as obviously then our people to make sure they are aligned with what our customer needs are. I think a lot of people talk about being employee first or anything like that, and it has to be balanced. Because if I do everything for all of our people, but not enough for our clients, then we don't exist. And then you end up sacrificing a lot of people. And then on the other balance of it, obviously, if we don't take care of our people and do right by them, our clients are going to go away because their needs aren't being met. So then you kind of talk about back to the private equity piece of, like sticking a bunch of other service providers together, just to create scale. Um, how is that beneficial to the client? I'd have to continue to ask myself. And again, are there a few things here and there that I think make sense to plug in, because we want to, increase a certain degree of capacity in that? Would it come with it additional partnerships? Would it allow us to reach into different markets? I think one of the challenges we have as an independent and where we are at our size is we don't have global scale. We are pretty much US or North America, if you kind of broaden it in that way. We have worked on global accounts, but we don't have boots on the ground in Asia or Europe or anything like that. And we lack that. Now, is that critical for us to have that? No, not necessarily. It just kind of really starts to say which clients, who are we best, what clients are we best serving? And for us to continue to grow, do I have to build global scale in order to go after there's so much business and so many clients out there who can be enormous by just satisfying the clients that are here in the US. And bigger than we even really ever need to be. So am I missing anything from that standpoint? On the other side of it, software, like I said, you can build stuff, to increase multiples, because, you've got something proprietary. One of the things also that I've learned is we are a service provider. We are not built to support software. Now we could have software enabled services, but for having done this for 20 years, how many times like a different content management system has come and gone, has been agencies used to build their own CMSs, and then you have all these CMSs, and then we have been certified on so many different CMSs because, there's a new CMS du jour or something that works better for the kinds of clients as we have evolved. What I don't want to do is be held back by software. If there's one that we have now that's not good anymore, we put a new one in because they spent a lot of time and effort in investing in all that stuff. I'd rather go that way than I would to build it and be held back because we have these now sunk costs that somebody's like, well, you spend all that money on it, you better make it worth it. Well, that takes my eye off of the ball of serving our customers, which is, and I think we have ourselves looked at, okay, we're going to build this thing because I don't see anything like that out there. We think this would help us do whatever. And I will tell you, it's about 10 seconds later, there's 50 other people who are doing the same thing.
It's really true.
Yeah, I mean, so if they're going to be a software provider, I would rather partner with them, let them deal with managing those. Also, allow 50 other people do it. 49 of them die. So like what? I don't know. It's just a shit table at Vegas.
Yeah.
So, I don't deal with it that way. So if we can keep our focus on being an excellent service provider, being agnostic to a degree, in the sense that we can say, hey, client, like, we used to recommend this one. Now we found something better. Now we recommend that. The price, whatever that may be. I think we're better poised. I would not, if I was a client, I would not trust any agency selling their own software. I hardly trust software companies selling their own software. So, I think that, I mean, like we have great partners, but we always say software sales. The answer to every question is yes.
Yeah.
I mean, does it do this? Yes. Well, it has to go under this. You have to plug that in. You have to, it has to be a full moon and, whatever it may be. But yes, it definitely could. Or that feature is coming. This is another one that I think
Yeah,
is
just
coming.
around the corner. Next quarter.
Right.
Now that.
Exactly. So that's
So
where I think private equity sort of motivates a couple of behaviors that I'm not real keen on.
gotcha. It's interesting. We did a episode with John Fitzpatrick from Force Marketing, who's in the automotive space, who is also not taken on outside private equity money, and much like you, has been very, very focused on just maniacally serving the customer base that is his and the niche that he's in. And then we have other entrepreneurs that have taken private equity money and have enjoyed that for a whole bunch of different reasons, and not just the cash, but the capability has allowed them to expand into new customers and new verticals that they wouldn't have otherwise. So there's certainly not one right way to go. But when I talk to you, and I'll bring us in here now on our couple last questions. When I talk to you, and I know how successful Red Door is, there's a lot of advice out there about how to grow an agency or a business and be successful at it. Are there any kind of core tenets that you've just clung to throughout the 20 years that have served you really well to get Red Door to where it is today?
A couple of things that I just to be where we are, and one of the, I will say always kind of the undercurrent of any of this stuff is to maintain sufficient paranoia to think that we're ever there yet, right? I mean, I think there is, and here's the benefit of experience in some cases where, the agency I left to start Red Door, they were 21 years old when they went out of business. So, I mean, I don't think it's time. You've got to keep your eye on the ball all the time. And I'll say, you just scale. I could tell you, I don't know how many big, like, companies that are much bigger than ours, certainly in our space, that have come and gone. Private equity owned by holding companies. They've merged and merged and merged, refolded, moved it around, and they just continue to move that. So core tenets for me is, one, stay present. I mean, just recognize that we are where we are, and to recognize, and be comfortable with a lot of what we have going on. And then two, again, it's that focus on listening to customers and listening to people, our employees. I mean, our employees will always want to be leading edge. They want to do new stuff. They want to try new things. And then holding that line between where clients are at the moment and what they're really willing to do, and kind of making sure that we're listening to those clients and being at the right place at the right time for them. And after that, I mean, as much as it kind of drives people nuts sometimes, there's as an independent, there is no like growth expectation. Like, we don't have to grow. We don't have to do any of this stuff. So, I think we have got to figure out what it is we want to do, what is going to be interesting, what is going to be, useful to our customers, and what's going to be energizing and meaningful to our people. Now, the benefit of growth, is it gives opportunity to people. So, is the more we grow, and we've got people who start with us at an intern, and 10 years later, can we make them in charge, head of a particular department or something to that fact? The only way to do that is to growth, or else we're going to have to go somewhere. which, that happens too. And it's all, and I get it. And most of those times they become clients of ours anyway. So it's not like we get some benefit from that standpoint, as long as we're do right by our people.
Got it.
Not take offense at that either. I mean, I think a lot of people I've seen, they just, get bent out of shape about people leaving or lament just stay present. We have the team we have, and keep doing right by them. I think that, again, I think people get, power or growth hungry and forget how to keep take their eye off the ball.
Yeah.
About what's going to be best for, your company or your clients and your people.
So let me finish up with this question. You've obviously been very, very successful in your business life. I know just a little bit about your personal life, but you've been successful there as well. Is there anything that you could point to that has had a lasting impact on you, whether that's been a person, mentor, a book, or an experience that you would credit in some way to what's got you to where you are now?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things for all of it is asking for help, right? And so, I've been involved in the early days in EO, Entrepreneurs Organization, and then I got into YPO. I've been in Vistage. I've been, people talk about mentors. I've had, not, any number of them in the sense that, I was never one to do an ongoing, mentorship. Let's meet every month, but it was, hey, I'm trying to figure this thing. I think I mentioned, not knowing how to read financials. One of my buddies who was in my EO forum, he was like, I'll show you how to do it. And we met a few times, like, 3 or 4 months. We'd close the books and we'd sit there and walk through it. And he would explain all this stuff to me. So, I mean, there's been a lot of that type of stuff that, how to open up other offices, how to acquire other companies, which we've done. We've acquired other companies. We're building our new headquarters in here in San Diego. How do you do stuff like that? I mean, hiring good, when it's time to hire outside of just asking for free advice, but, hiring, ideally the best and being willing to pay for, really the best consultants and not going cheap on stuff. I think that's another one that's been a really important lesson to us is, as much as people say kind of get what you pay for, I think that's a little pretty broad. But having people who are, recommended, who are able to give you the amount of time that you need, that they're motivated and interested in what you're doing, but also highly capable, and recognize those people oftentimes are quite expensive. And just, it saves you so much time and money when you actually invest in the right people and talent.
Yeah.
So, and there's a reason why they're worth it, I guess, in many respects.
Well,
I don't think it's, yeah.
I'm sorry to cut you off. I was just saying, having spent this half hour or so with you, it explains a lot of Red Door's success. And it was great to have you share some of that. I think it also underscores, the name of the podcast is Second Bite Podcast, but it underscores the fact that there's just not one single path to success in any business endeavor. And I think you are a good, representation of exactly that. So Reid, I'll say thanks to you. If somebody wants to learn more about Red Door, they go to reddoor.biz. Is that correct?
Yep. Yeah,
as the website. Reid Carr also on LinkedIn. On the podcast, you'll find a bunch of links to spots on this podcast, and then also how to reach out to Reid and Red Door if need be. So, Reid, I'll say thank you to you for being our guest today. I'll say thank you again to the people at EOS Worldwide, and thanks. Great to have you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me. Take care.
Thanks for listening to the Second Bite Podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.